This training session, we're going to cover vertical ventilation roof operations. The first thing we're going to talk about is travel on the roof. We want everybody to make sure they understand the golden rule on the roof is that we don't walk there unless that area has been probed. So when we start talking about probing, what we're talking about is we're talking about getting a feel for the roof. It's not necessarily a sound. A lot of people like to call it sounding, which is fine. It's the same thing whether we call it sounding or probing, but we're trying to get a good feel for the roof. When we talk about travel on the roof, the person that actually does the probing of the crew is up to the captain. He's going to designate that person. Hopefully it's someone that has the experience and the knowledge. Usually not a good idea to use the probationary firefighter in that role. But the captain's going to designate the person he feels confident that can be a good probe person. If the captain is not the probe person, we highly recommend that the captain be right behind the probe person. If he's not, if there's someone between the probe person, the lead probe person, and the captain, it makes it difficult for the captain to communicate with that front person. Remember, the captain is responsible for the location of that hole, and he should be in a position to have some input into where the hole is located. If the probe person is going in one direction and the captain would like to go in another direction, with the captain being right behind the probe person, he can tap on the shoulder, they can do some hand signals, and then they can get going in the direction the captain wants to go. If the captain is not in that position, if he's not in close proximity to the lead probe person, he's going to have trouble communicating, and that they may end up in an area the captain doesn't want to be in. The other thing is when we're traveling on the roof, we want to make sure that anytime we encounter either a step up, a step down, or a step over, so any change in elevation of a roof, what we want to do is we want to travel over to the bearing wall, do our change of elevation, like I say, whether it's a step over, a step up, or a step down, do it at the bearing wall, and then from the bearing wall we will proceed back out to the body of the roof with a probe person probing. The other thing about probing, a couple of things we want to make sure we talk about, we want to talk about the tool that probe person chooses to probe with. If he chooses a tool that has too large of a surface area, he's going to lose some of the feel of the roof because the force is going to be distributed over too big of an area, and he's not going to be able to feel that roof appropriately. So we recommend something that has a smaller area on the end of it for probing. The other thing is if the handle on that tool is too long, and when we say too long, longer than 8 feet, then that tool becomes unwieldy and you get too much gyration above his hands and he loses the feel down at his feet where you want to be able to feel the roof. The other thing we want to mention about travel on the roof is crossing over the peak of a pitched roof is acceptable. So when structures are constructed, we just want to remember that every single part of that roof is just as strong as every other part. There are no inherent weak spots in that roof. So if we're probing, traveling in a safe manner, as we proceed, if we need to cross over the peak of the roof, we can do that safely. All right, so now we're going to move into the standard roof operation. Phoenix Fire Department has standardized our roof operations. We want to remember that all of our actions while operating on the roof should fit into this standard operational framework. A roof operation should look like a roof operation. Everybody that sees that operation should feel comfortable with it. Nobody should have any heartache with anything we do on the roof. If our operations fall outside of our standard roof operation, we place our personnel in danger, we compromise the integrity of the entire operation, and those depending on vertical ventilation start to lose confidence in the ladder crew's ability to do it. So with this in mind, our Phoenix Fire Department standard roof operation, it has 3 roles that have to be filled every single time. So that means we have 3 people that have to be on the roof. There are no 2-person Phoenix Fire Department roof operations. If a crew wants to take 4 to the roof, that's fine. Just make sure that that 4th person has a role. He knows what his role is and he's filling that role. We do not take observers to the roof. So everybody's got a job, everybody's got a tool, and they know what that is. So getting into the roles of the individual crew members, first thing we have is the operation oversight person. This is going to be the captain. It's absolutely imperative that this role is filled every single time and the whole time that that crew is operating on the roof. This person's responsibility is to have a wide focus. So operations oversight person, he's watching everything. He's watching the fire conditions, he's reading the smoke, he's looking at the building, he's observing the building, he's watching for any changing conditions on the building, and he's watching his crew. So at no point in time will this person have his focus narrowed down to the task level so that his head will be looking down and focusing in a small area. The whole time he's going to have his head up, he's going to be looking at taking in the big picture and monitoring everything, all those factors that we talked about. If at any time he sees anything that he doesn't like, he's going to communicate with his crew, and they are either going to relocate their position or they're going to go ahead and exit the roof. We also feel confident that during the cut operation, while the backup person and the cut person are conducting the cut operation, we feel confident that this operation oversight person can have a pike pole in his hand and probing around the cut operation. So the operations oversight person is going to be monitoring the decking material. He's going to be checking for any changing conditions that may be occurring while they're in that spot cutting the hole. And he's still going to have his head up, taking in that wide view, that wide perspective, watching the building, watching the fire conditions, and monitoring his crew. The second role on the roof is the backup person. Just to kind of give a little bit of background into the back person before we start talking about that. What we do with our cut person is we put them in an extremely vulnerable position. So we tell our cut person that they're going to focus on an area about a square foot in size. We tell them that they're going to, and while they're doing that, we're going to tell them they're going to be walking backwards, and a good part of the time they're going to be in either limited or no visibility. So we put that person in an extremely vulnerable position. And remember, we do not want that person having to look around, we want them focusing on the bar of that saw or the blade of that saw. So with the backup person is responsible to watch out for the overall safety of the cut person while they have their focus narrowed down and they're in that limited or no visibility environment. So the backup person is going to have 2 hands on the cut person. While the cut person is cutting, he's going to have 2 hands on him. He's making sure that the cut person does not back off of the roof, back into any obstructions on the roof. Also, the backup person is responsible to assist the cut person. Make sure that his cuts aren't too long, make sure that his cuts aren't too deep, make sure that they're long enough, that they're deep enough. He's also going to make sure that that cut person is following the proper sequence of cuts. If at any time that backup person sees something that the cut person's doing that he doesn't like, he's going to stop them. They're going to communicate before they proceed any further. So it's imperative that the backup person is right there. He's going to have 2 hands on him, and it's basically a dance that they're doing. So the cut person is moving, going through a sequence of cuts. The backup person is in contact with them with both hands. They're doing a dance on the roof. They're flowing through the procedure of cutting the hole. The third role on the roof is our cut person. So the cut person is responsible to be familiar with the flooded saw procedure. We know how those saws are very temperamental. They flood extremely easily. And so it's up to that cut person to make sure that he gets that saw started. If it does become a flooded saw, everybody on the roof will know that fairly quickly. We recommend the backup person jump down there and make that a 2-person start procedure. The backup person can hold the saw and control the levers while the cut person works through the flooded saw procedure. So the cut person is responsible to be familiar with the sequence of cuts. Okay, so that's his role, that's his job. He should be communicating with his crew at the beginning of the shift, making sure everybody's on the same page, all 3 members that are going to be on the roof in that roof operation, and he knows what his sequence is going to be like. And then finally, the last thing the cuts person is responsible for is he should be familiar with his role in the overall operation. So when he's done cutting that hole, what does he do? So many times we see the cut person standing there with a running saw. The crew is in the smoke. You have one person trying to punch the louvers, can't see where the cut person is. All he does is hear a saw. We want that cut person to stand back, get out of the way, so that that person louvering the cut has plenty of safe working area. So now we would like to talk about the hole, the cut that we're making. So what we've done is on the Phoenix Fire Department is we have standardized our cuts. So on a wood decked roof, whether it's residential or commercial, whether it's flat or pitched, if it's wood decking, we use a 4x8 louver, and that's the only cut we have on a wood decked roof. The other cut that we have in our toolbox with the Phoenix Fire Department roof operation is a right-handed outside cut, and the only scenario we use that in is on a commercial metal decked roof, and that is a whole different training session. So the 4x8 louver is our standard, like I say, residential, commercial, flat, pitched. That's the 4x8 louver is what we're going to use. It can be a 3x6. We're going to call it a 4x8, but it can be a 3x6. The crew should be talking about when they're making on the down cuts, the crew should determine whether they want 4 or 5 down cuts. It doesn't make any difference which it is. 4 is plenty. If the crew wants to do 5 down cuts on the louver cuts, that's fine. Don't need more than 5. Stop at 5. And then 3 is probably not going to be enough. The reason we've standardized this 4x8 louver is it's fast, it's effective, it's efficient, it works really, really well for us. From the time the cut person starts their cuts to the time they finish is a minute or less on most of our roofs on wood deck roofs that we operate on. The other thing a 4x8 louver does is it gets relief to the interior crews very quickly. The larger the hole, the more time it takes, the more you wear out your saw, and so the ventilation or the effects for the interior crews takes longer. One of the reasons we want to keep those down cuts 4 feet or less is when the backup person goes to louver those louvers, they have to lean over the hole to do that. They're going to be in the smoke. If they're not in the smoke, probably didn't need to cut that hole, but they're going to be in the smoke, so their visibility is going to be limited, and you don't want them reaching way over the hole trying to make those louvers. So we want to keep those louvers manageable for that person. If that person that's punching those louvers, if he wants to get down on his knees to do that, that's acceptable. So it gives him a little bit more solid base to be on rather than standing up. Like I say, he is going to be in the smoke. He is going to be in either limited, most of the time in no visibility. So he's working off of just feel. And so down on the knees gives him a little bit more stable base to work from, and it gets him closer to his work. So that's acceptable. What we don't want is if after you cut the hole and you louver it, if there are flames coming out of the hole, at that point in time, we're not going to punch the ceiling. You got 2 options there. You can either just go ahead and exit the roof. You can back up, get back down to the bearing wall, wait for the interior crews to make the knockdown on the fire, go back up and punch the ceiling. but do not try punching out the ceiling if you have flames coming out of the ventilation hole. The other thing we need to talk about are the diving boards on the side of the ventilation hole. Don't worry about trying to eliminate them. It takes too much time and it's not necessary. Just assume that once you cut a 4x8 louver on a wood deck roof, that the sides, both sides, will have a diving board on there. Just be aware of that. There's no reason to walk around that close. If you do have to walk around that hole, make sure you do it at least 2 feet away. That give you a safe distance around that. But the diving boards on the sides are completely acceptable. There's no reason to spend any time trying to eliminate them. Also, just remember that anytime you use the chainsaw to make a cut, red tag it, send it in. What happens is that when you use those saws, they become dull. They're not as sharp as they are. There's no way to look at it and determine if it's sharp or dull. Just red tag it, send it in. Same with the wood blade on the circular saw. If you use a circular saw with a wood blade to make any type of cut, take the blade off, change it out, get a nice sharp one on there, red tag the one, send it in, get it sharpened. There again, there's no way to tell if it's sharp or dull. I've seen crews trying to cut a hole with a dull saw. It doesn't work. You can't do it. It becomes an unsafe operation and they can't accomplish their task.